The human mind is remarkably resilient, but it was never engineered to carry the burden of being everything for itself. Today, millions find themselves sinking under the weight of an invisible structural load that has become the defining feature of the modern experience. We wake up to a relentless set of cultural commands. We are told to define ourselves, discover our own truth, heal our own wounds, and validate our own worth. This mandate appears empowering. It promises complete autonomy and the freedom to become whoever you want to be whenever you choose. But this architecture contains a hidden flaw. The human self lacks the capacity to hold ultimacy. We were not built to serve as the central authority for our own reality. When we place the self at the center, we stack an impossible number of roles onto the individual. A person is forced to simultaneously act as their own philosopher, moral judge, identity creator, priest, and savior. Eventually, a specific kind of exhaustion sets in. Attempting to sustain all of these roles without any external support system drains the individual's psychological reserves. When your entire existence depends exclusively on your ability to hold yourself together, a single fracture in your performance feels like a catastrophic structural failure. This is a closed-loop existence. When the self is treated as the ultimate authority, reality shrinks to a single central node. Every directional pathway of meaning and validation begins and ends entirely within you. This sealed system creates a logistical crisis. There is no external mechanism or location to deposit guilt, shame, fear, or grief. Since there is nowhere outside the self to place these burdens, you are forced to carry all of them. This drives a cycle of recursive suffering. Instead of being processed and released, every painful experience loops back into your core identity. The constant pressure strikes the center until it begins to warp and destabilize. Under this recursion, standard human pain mutates. A rejection is no longer a social sting. It becomes the conviction that you have no worth. A failure translates directly into the feeling that you are broken at the core. If this loop continues, the internal pain eventually forces a dark conclusion. If the self cannot sustain meaning, then existence itself must have no meaning. When millions of people are trapped in these private recursive loops, the result is a society defined by fragmentation and emotional exhaustion. Our current levels of anxiety and identity instability are the predictable outputs of an architecture that leaves the individual isolated under the weight of their own existence. Human beings have always lived with pain. What has changed is the disappearance of the transcendent structures that once held that suffering meaningfully. Organizing a life solely around subjective desire and self-definition, rather than an objective design, creates an unstable foundation. Because the self is finite and vulnerable, it buckles under the pressure of acting as the ultimate authority. The structure reaches its limit and shatters. To survive the collapse, many adopt a stunted logic. They stop asking deeper questions about reality or God, accepting only the ideas that preserve their immediate emotional comfort. Modern attempts at healing often fail because they stay within the loop. Self-validation and self-repair only keep the burden trapped inside the same failing structure. An anthropocentric system has no release valve. The absolute autonomy we sought becomes the exact cage that crushes us. Christianity represents a complete reordering of reality's architecture, moving far beyond a simple list of moral rules or behaviors. In this structure, truth, goodness, and meaning are firmly anchored because they exist objectively outside of the human self. This shifts the way identity functions. It becomes something you receive from an external source, rather than a performance you must constantly manufacture and defend. Grounding your value in God provides a foundation strong enough to withstand failure, uncertainty, and the reality of death. Structural stability arrives only when the human being no longer has to function as its own ultimate center. The Christian idea of dying to self liberates the individual from the impossible job of being God, rather than destroying one's personality. Attempting to sustain existence by yourself makes life increasingly heavy. Surrendering to a transcendent order makes existence finally inhabitable. In the Incarnation, God does not observe our struggle from a distance. He enters directly into the collapse of human pain. The cross acts as the ultimate burden transfer. It marks the surrender of self-sovereignty and offers a freedom from the labor of self-salvation that no internal effort can provide. Peace begins when we finally stop attempting to carry the existential weight that only God was designed to hold.